well, but Dragonshire for game number 1.
Yeah, Dragonshire. Now, Frozen X actually said during that interview that they heavily prioritize to abuse globals. Now, we've seen the recent changes to Dahaka because right now we're on that where his W's nerfed a little bit. You know, we saw some changes there. And then Falstad, obviously, they like that. But one thing, and I was actually researching all this, Frozen X, notorious last year, Gusterbust, Astral Authority, if you remember those names, was notorious for playing Zagara. We saw some slight changes to Zagara. She fell off, but she's back. During the playoffs, Dragonshire, they played Zagara. Frozen X, I looked, in 16 competitive games dating back to last year, has a 75% win rate on Zagara.
Well, like you mentioned, you think back to things like PAX West last year, that's what you were seeing a ton of, and Frozen X was one of those household names in the competitive scene at the time. They're looking to make their return, but No Tomorrow are going to give them a good run for their money. Should be a great matchup here. I do not expect a 4-0 either way. I think we're going to at least a Game 6. J-How prediction before we get into this draft.
I'd love to see if it goes 7. I mean, I just worry about what we're going to see from these teams, but a ban on Murden. And I think that Murden right now, when it comes to the meta on Dragonshire, we've seen a heavy priority rotating it between that mid and top lane. As we see, again, the focal point is going to be on the globals. They are just snap blocking these picks. Take Falstad, pick up one of the strongest heroes in the game, make that first pick a Nubarak.
And even in the interview that we just listened to of the teams, they mentioned they like to play the globals. That's a big part of the draft here for Even in Death. So smart for No Tomorrow just to focus that Falstad early. They get the Greymane Mouth after losing that Anubarak. Pretty much what you'd expect here in the early stages of the draft on Dragonshire.
One of the more interesting things for me is kind of the focus on on different heroes for our front line on No Tomorrow. Is that the hero pool, I don't want to say it's smaller, but it lends to different heroes that generally we don't see. You know, a lot of times we'll see Leoric and stuff like that. But for No Tomorrow, it's different. We've even seen Thrall on this map. It used to be about a year ago, it was kind of like Thrall versus Zagara. I mean, those types of things come up, and to me, that's one of my biggest question marks looking at No Tomorrow. They all have that competitive experience, but Casanova on that front line, how deep is his hero pool? Because he plays kind of that secondary warrior, the Zarya, the Tyrael, things like that. There's Genji, that's going to be homicidal. They're playing for the late game. They've gotten a Zebo, so we know exactly what their strategy is, playing to their strengths. And No Tomorrow, as they said, one word to define them, standard, and I'm okay with that. Even in death, play to your strengths.
I would agree. I mean, if that's what you're comfortable with, no reason to try to go crazy. We've seen so many teams try to change their style for a competition just to throw their opponents off and fail miserably. So go with what you're strong with. Wouldn't be surprised to see if we ended up seeing strong solo laner like Zagara in the top here for Even in Death in the later half. But Uther has been banned out to try to restrict the support options, considering Mouth has already been banned as well. However, is pretty flexible, you know?
Yeah, and I don't really worry too much about that in particular. They're going to ban Gul'dan, I like that. We talk about Talking Trees on the other team. He could be on the Greymane. Talking Trees is more of a flexible range player that can play a lot of the weird heroes as well, like Abathur, things like that. He's been doing that for a very long time. I think Li Ming competitively is his most played hero. I don't know if we'll see that, especially with a Nubarak on the other side.
Yeah.
But Gul'dan obviously falls into a slightly different realm.
Ooh.
Speaking of Zagara, just take it away. Just keep it for yourself.
Yeah, that's smart. I mean, it gives you the strong solo lane, gives you good push potential. Also safe with all the creep spread, so you don't have to worry about the Genji as much. However, you know, throwing a Hydralisk on Genji, he's not going to like it. It's not the biggest threat, though. They don't have the big stuns or anything.
Oh.
Olarak will help with that, however.
Alarak, this is the live patch. So if you're wondering, is this the reworked Alarak? Yes, it is. So Alarak, we haven't really seen him competitively.
Is this the first Alarak of the weekend?
I believe so. We saw him banned on Battlefield of Eternity yesterday, which was considered one of his stronger maps. But Alarak fits into a, you know, we don't know. Traditionally, Alarak in the past was kind of a solo laner because he has the self-sustain, but that's kind of Zagara's role as well. So I'm curious if we're going to see kind of like a rotation, a hybrid rotation. Can that deal with the Genji, taking care of some of his mobility, silencing him if he comes in deep? Again, we talk about Genji, right? Shurikens, they grow out in a fan, and you want to get close to try and get that kill shot. If you come in, you're in that melee range, it's a little bit easier to land the Discord Strike, things like that, to silence him, to lock him down, to do some damage. So Alarak, curious how this is going to play out.
Probably Casanova on the Alarak?
Yeah, I think it's got to be Casanova on the Alarak.
Okay, that's going to be exciting to see that, because he's kind of that hero where, yes, the rework, there's a question mark of how strong he really is. Sometimes you see him in Hero League and he feels like a dud, but this is... So typically you put Nazebo in the bottom lane so you can kind of get the rotate, the double soak, farm up those stacks.
Farm up the stacks for late game.
And we've seen Genji attempted for like solo lane situations, but against Zagara,
now that Illidan's picked up, that might be Homicidal moving over to Illidan.
Oh, that's true.
With Frozen X being on Genji, because Frozen X is kind of there. He's the more flexible player on their team, as we see Varian, kind of that lock one. That does do well, dealing with heroes like Illidan, like Genji, and if you can combo off of that with Alarak, right? So you can get the taunt, you can try and get the follow-up CC, the stun train going on there, or basically the silence, the telekinesis, just lock them down. And both those heroes, Illidan and Genji, both rely on mobility. Both are abilities that you can't be silenced for, right? So an interesting approach, I think, there for both teams. This is not the draft I expected.
No, the Illidan is definitely a mix-up that I wasn't expecting here, especially against the Alarak, because again, they're so silences last longer than any other CC because you can move, right? You're not rooted, you're not stunned. Silences persist for an extended period of time, usually about 2 seconds, and 2 seconds is a lifetime in Heroes of the Storm.
I think we talked about the abuse of globals for even and death.
Yeah.
Is that where Illidan comes in? Is this a hunt game? Oh. You start to wonder, because when you're, it's one of the games we watched earlier, right? Illidan was being played on Cursed Hollow, and you kind of wonder, there's a lot of CC on the other side. All of a sudden, you're like, wait a minute, I have to time my abilities a little bit better. I can't afford to go the hunt. So you have to be forced into Metamorphosis because of the enemy composition. This might fall into that same realm. You might want to get that global. You might want to try and get picks. Dragonshire's a little bit weirder, right? Because it's smaller, even though it's a 3-lane map. But it's a little bit weirder to go the hunt. It's not out of the ordinary, but then you have to start looking at the enemy team composition. You might be forced into something like Metamorphosis just to try and avoid some of those shots.
Yeah, you got to be worried about first the taunt coming through, the follow-up of the silence, Cursed Bullet just tearing you in half, even if you have Metamorphosis like Cursed Bullet.
Same for X-Strike. I mean, they banned Uther so you don't get D-Shield with Dragon Blade, but X-Strike, sometimes we've seen it used defensively, like, I'm about to die, I better do something to where they can't hit me. And I am curious what the heroics are going to be for both Illidan and Genji. I don't like the composition. It just doesn't seem. It doesn't seem. It's all in, right?
It's all in.
You're
They're
all
committed.
In.
Well, it's time to begin the best of 7 series here between No Tomorrow and Even in Death. Who will take it? Let us know on Twitter, because we're going to Dragonshire.
All right, Jake, game number 1. This is the last game that we will have in the Crucible, the last matches. It's going to be Tiger JK on Malfurion, Urho on Varian. Talking Trees will be on the Alarak, Casanova on Greymane with Jason on Zagara.
They're challengers from the open division. We got How on the Rhaegar. It's going to be Battery playing that Anub Arak. Lutano on the Genji. Then we have Frozen X playing Nazebo. And rounding it out is Homicidal on Illidan. Now, we talked a bit about Lutano and Homicidal, 2 of the less known names on this team being, especially Lutano on those ranged assassins. It's going to be fun to see how he does here on that Genji.
I mean, technically, Genji is labeled as a ranged assassin, but we all know good and well that he goes in, and we see the full use of Alarak right away. Battery just barely able to get away. That is the stun train. I mean, it's not even stuns, right? We'll see the taunt later on, but we'll see. As Genji going in, trying to do some damage onto Jason. The good thing about Genji against the Zagara, your Q that goes out does reveal the creep, so it makes for pretty easy creep clear. And more importantly, Zagara going for Infest, playing for that late game. The more siege damage you do, the more damage the ranged minions will do when you are near them.
Yeah, it just becomes a problem if you ever leave that Zagara alone. The push becomes that much more quick as it shreds through your minion wave and, again, gets to those towers. I do like that the posture here of the Genji is kind of sitting around trying to harass the Zagara the best he can, and also just being a nuisance, buying some space there for Battery, who's been bullied pretty heavily from that 4-man rotation in the mid-bottom lane.
That's another creep clear ability with Immolation on Illidan. He can use his W. So I don't know how much Zagara push we'll get. That's always my concern. It's not about what Zagara can do early game. That's easy, right? You can put your W on somebody. You just bully people off the lane. You can stay there. You don't necessarily have to worry too much about picks because you have the bonus movement speed. But late game, if you don't get that Zagara value late game, you run into all kinds of problems. Infest, you're already committed to Nidus. That's the general standard. But I really wonder what we will see as we do move into that late game.
Zebo working on those spider stacks pretty quickly. Zombie Wall, great position here, but is it enough for How? No, the roots come through, and How will be the first blood of the game. Great rotation. You got to be so careful with that CC telekinesis. You got the charge that comes in with the slow. You got the roots to worry about, and then, of course, the silence. It's just so much in the rotation.
It's nice to see Alarak back in the meta. And, you know, now that I'm thinking about it, when I was looking at the drafts earlier, I'm pretty sure last year I remember seeing a number either 6 or 8 games for Talking Trees on that Alarak. So it's not a hero that he's unfamiliar with. It's just a hero that hasn't really been in the meta in a while.
I hope the rework makes him more popular because Alarak is definitely a fun hero to watch. The only hero in the game that can get both of his heroics at level 20. Battery charging in, gets the body blocks, but he's taking a lot of damage himself. The roots come through, and Battery goes down. Great focus, but Illidan's a hero that kind of snowballs with Genji. They get the 1 kill. Casanova will fall as well. Resets for the E, so he's going to dash into the mid lane and make sure he can deny the dragon if it was attempted from Zagara.
That is definitely one thing you don't want to deal with. One goes down. We saw a good use of that dash from Genji, and then Illidan, he's there to clean up. I mean, which one do you prioritize? Your shot calling better be on point because both those heroes are going to be an absolute terror in that back line if the moment suits.
You know, I like Homicidal here a lot just because Immolation helps deal with the creep spread fairly well, about as good as you could wish for. And also, I believe that Genji Shurikens do connect with those creep as well.
Oh yeah, it's really not fun to play against an Illidan and a Genji if you are Zagara, but we'll see exactly what she can do. As Jason might have overstepped here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to get a little bit of poke in, but you are Zagara, and you have no creep to retreat on. That is going to be another kill there.
All right, even death fighting back, 3-2 in terms of kills. Pretty quick start to the kills in this game here on Dragonshire. Game number 1, but these teams are a bit more aggressive than some of the other teams that we do have here in HGC.
You know, we talk about that. I put up a graphic about a week ago on Twitter, and it was about like the top teams, the top 8 teams from the major regions going to the mid-season brawl all have the highest KDAs in the world. Okay, it's not a coincidence. These teams, a little bit on the opposite end of the spectrum. They fight a lot, and they give up a lot. And, you know, they're fighting for that spot. And those are things that they have to improve on. So trying to min-max your potential, your opportunities, it's something that I think sometimes you'll see teams struggle with.
It's true, and finding that balance is really difficult. How so very low does end up going down from that last auto attack on Talking Trees, I believe it was, that got the kill. Illidan's going to get that Merc camp while Genji tries to claim that top shrine for his team to make sure no dragon's a threat during the death of Rhaegar because they are a bit vulnerable for the next 5 seconds or so.
Oh, it looks like Urho might have been caught out, but Battery... actually, Battery is the one that was caught out as Urho stays on top of him with the body block, and that is another takedown. We have 7 kills in our first 5 minutes.
Like we were saying, these teams just kind of go at it. Frozen X uses the spiders to dissuade the approach here of Urho. Lots of stacks attained for free. Zombie Wall perfectly thrown down there, and Urho just taking a lot of free damage.
Trying to hold on. Obviously, we see both being channeled at the moment as 3 members are defending the middle for No Tomorrow, as again, the creep spread is basically non-existent going up against an Illidan and a Genji. Again, it is one of the most difficult things to play through the bottom channel just in time to deny the first Dragon Knight of the game.
So Spiders about 90% through the quest talent completed, 77 stacks there, or so I guess it's more like 80%. But yeah, really good start here for the Nazebo, just getting all those spiders stacked onto a target like Varian that doesn't have the mobility to run away from them. All they need to do is nip at your heels to power up and get towards a completion.
All right, level 10 quickly approaching as both these teams should lock it in momentarily, and this is where things are going to get really interesting because sometimes, you know, we've seen these picks so far, but now this is when the team fights really start to open up. You talk about Nidus being available as well. That's going to allow Zagara to put pressure on different parts of the map. Maybe join a team fight where numbers are even, and then you make it uneven by joining that fight. But it is up to spreading that creep all the while. Homicidal.
Is that Tranquility?
I'm okay with that. But we do see the Hunt, so that is going to be the global. They're not going to go Metamorphosis. So we're going to see Tranquility on the back line. Genji and Illidan, they are persistent damage. It's not burst damage. Genji does have a little bit, as we see the taunt onto Genji himself. So maybe Tranquility will help sustain through that.
It's certainly
the
interesting. The only thing you have to keep in mind when you see Tranquility is then suddenly if you can like get a lot of big poke, especially as Nazebo, Malfurion can actually start to have mana issues. Twilight Dream gives additional mana regen to Malfurion.
Oh, yeah.
And not having that against a level 20 Nazebo could end up being problematic in the late game.
It's actually one of the most underrated parts of that
exactly.
heroic.
A lot of people forget about that.
It was like 1.5. I think I had to get nerfed to like 1.25 extra just because it was so OP.
Yeah, I mean, originally Malfurion had Conjurer's Pursuit, but in his current iteration, the only way you can have mana regen is through that the Twilight Dream. Jason gets hunted on here in the top lane, secluded in the top. Might end up going down here. Yeah, the final hit should come through. No way to get into that Nidus, so a good kill there from the Illidan in the top lane.
You know, when I play Zagara, I'm like, I hope they don't draft an Illidan because it is not a fun feeling. You're isolated, you're trying to push out the lanes. The minute you show to those minions, the hunt is a small battleground. So the hunt takes no problem. It does have a range, but it does not take Illidan very far to find you.
Well, both shrines will be turning red here. Experience a deadlock right now for these teams, even with that kill in Illidan or from Illidan on Zagara in the top lane. Not too much experience lost. Zagara immediately popping out of that Nidus in the top lane to force Illidan away.
Just see it pop up on the mini-map. It's like, I'll back out a little bit. But I'm not going very far as he's just going to back up. That is what Zagara does best. As you can see, that clear is pretty significant. But down in the bottom, camp being picked up for No Tomorrow.
Well, Alarak, he's actually about a third through both of his quest talents, so he's got a lot of work to do before he really ramps up, reaches that full potential from the early game talents. 13 will be locked in momentarily for both teams as they pace around. Still no dragon in this game, as it's just kind of been a slugfest. 6 forts stand on either side, 4 kills on either side. About it even as you could hope for. The hunt coming out onto the top lane as Jason is the target once more. Lutano, fearful to go too deep. Not knowing where the enemy team is, but they are diving on the bottom fort.
I'm surprised they didn't commit. Instead, we see Rhaegar fall again in the bottom lane with that 4-man push from No Tomorrow. So another pick, another takedown, and they're going to leave Illidan and Genji up in the top while the rest of the members on No Tomorrow are like, fine, take it. I would gladly trade a bottom fort, but taking down that top fort is a way to deny Zagara that top lane push that you know she's going to be there for.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, being able to take that away from her, forcing her to rotate, you know, you get rid of those Nidus charges. It's a fairly long cooldown, 15 more seconds before he has another one up and available. He's going to want to try to find some more creep spread, maybe in the bottom lane next, since he only has the forward Nidus in the mid lane right now. But top fort is quite low. Didn't quite finish it. Oh, the silence is just too much for Anubarak, and battery falls once more.
Anubarak is having a tough time with that Alarak as Genji has now made his way down. But the bottom push will continue here. Zagara not showing on the map. I'm curious if we're going to see Even in Death try and be aggressive with that combination. Instead, Genji, can he sniff out the Zagara? He's just going to play it safe.
All right, Lutano gets eyes on, jumps away. Homicidal also trying to back up, but a little bit too slow. And again, telekinesis into the silence and the taunt. It's the cleanest, easiest kill you could imagine.
I mean, that's exactly what we talked about. This composition with Alarak and Varian. Very, very scary, and you just put Greymane behind that. It's blow-up potential.
They just get dumped on.
This is tough. I mean, they're starting, No Tomorrow is slowly starting to distance themselves. They've got about a level and a half lead. They've got 2 siege camps that will just push down this keep wall, force a response. Zagara has moved to the top, which means that we're going to see a potential Dragon Knight about 11 minutes in. With
level 16 on the table, yeah, I don't think they can contest this. Lutano gets taunted. The roots are a little late. He jukes just barely. Does he have the jump available? Uses deflect. There's the jump, opting to not go over the wall towards the well. Healing totem drop there from Rhaegar, but good he was able to survive. Don't think they can stop the dragon here.
They can try. I mean, Zagara is starting to get a little bit more creep spread. Illidan kind of rotating around. He's going to put some pressure onto Zagara, but I think this should be the first Dragon Knight pretty easily grabbed. Finally, 11 minutes in, things are starting to open up for No Tomorrow.
I love this composition. When you think about that first pick, Anubarak, and the fact that they kind of filled out the rest of the composition with, you know, really melees. Illidan and Genji are both kind of melee assassins. And their comp just deals with it well. They didn't draft a mage. They didn't draft something like Chromie, and that's really where you're thinking, it's like, Anubarak, he's going to be great against the Gilne and Cocktail build. He's fine against it, but it doesn't matter if you just silence him and blow him up. Really cool draft here with the Alarak. Loving it so far.
Good cleanse there by Hao to keep Genji safe. Maybe a little bit preemptive there, not a huge threat behind that. But we see, because it's such an early Dragonite, that it makes it very difficult to push into that bottom lane. I'm surprised they didn't, because they had already opened up the keep wall. They instead take the mid fort, get the experience, open up the map a little bit more. That bottom that they opened up, they're not going to worry. But on the backside, Zagara is now being threatened. Tranquility, not enough to keep him alive. Battery goes down as well.
All right, the Ancestral Heal did end up getting off. They lost Battery. The silence once again on Illidan, denying him all that steel. Lutano pulled back by the telekinesis. The Lightning will finish the deal. Ends up being a 3-for-1. Big pressure here across the board, but that was a fight without 16 talent tier on the side of Even in Death.
How you like that Alarak, Jake? Looking pretty good right now.
He's laughing at them, literally.
I think he just made another play there as Nazebo just got absolutely worked. Now that keep finally going to fall. This is a big, big moment for No Tomorrow to have that bottom lane open just 13 minutes in. The thing about this, Jake, is that with that bottom lane being open is that now there will be constant pressure in that bottom lane. And when Zagara starts to slowly open up that top lane, she'll now have the freedom to do that. So now you're going to have 2 lanes of pressure. The only answer you really have is going to be that Hunt and Genji combo if you can catch her out. But it's going to be a little bit easier now for Zagara with some of that pressure relieved by opening up that bottom lane.
And typically, you think about you need a tank that helps out a hero like Zagara that doesn't have mobility in the back. But Alarak can kind of just turn around and pull those targets in, and then Varian just charges forward and taunts them and holds them in place, and before you know it, you are dead.
It's a very well thought out strategy.
Yep.
So I really like what No Tomorrow is doing. They're continuing to pick up the siege camps. Level 16 is picked up for Even in Death, so we'll see if they can try and take a fight. Illidan got to be very careful with his positioning top. We've already seen the combo. He's out, and this is it.
Oh boy!
You can't push out. If you do not see them on the map,
yeah,
you can't push out into a lane.
I mean, you pay dearly for those kind of mistakes too. 2-level disadvantage right now in favor of No Tomorrow, holding strong here in game number 1. But level 16 is a big deal on the side of Even in Death, and we have to remember, Nazebo is in fact a late game hero. You draft him expecting to get past that 20-minute marker. Dragon Chair typically does that, but right now, with such a strong lead on the side of No Tomorrow, Even in Death really got to find some opportunities. They've only lost that bottom keep, but they are on the back foot.
They're on the back foot, and the thing about it is that when you talk about Zagara, if she can get that push bottom lane, you don't necessarily have the best sieging team, but Greymane definitely helps supplement that. But level 20, as 2 Niduses are there side by side, but level 20 plus a Dragon Knight will threaten core at this point. That's the thing, is that it might not be guaranteed, but you can rest assured they're probably going to be going bottom lane with this and see if they can open it up. And I really think that they need to try and put some pressure, test the waters, and see what they can do, and they're going to do just that.
Yeah, there's no reason to not try to put this pressure on. You've got Zagara, one of the best heroes you could ever hope to have in a siege situation like this. With a dragon, pushing on in, 20 advantage to just about level 18 being picked up here for Even in Death.
I mean, Genji and Illidan aren't defending this. I mean, they just got to dive. They've got to dive the back line. The cleanse onto Zagara. She's in a lot of trouble. But now we see the Ancestral has been used onto Battery. They're trying to defend, but shields are going down.
Jason should end up dying, but does it matter? Look how fast that core is melting. No Tomorrow, looking great so far at this top of the series. We'll take game number 1.
It's not entirely...
Oh, it's going down, Jake. Okay. It's going down.
Urho says, yeah, I got this.
Calaris isn't here.
Well, it was pretty even for about 10 minutes, and then No Tomorrow just said, look, enough is enough. Let's start getting our picks. The minute level 10 came up, they started going down. That was tough, man.
I appreciate the innovation attempted with like the Genji Illidan.
I didn't like it in the draft, and I definitely didn't like it after that game. It's just, we saw the effects of it there. I mean, Genji is a ranged hero that moves into that. It's not the same style as Greymane. You're not getting that max value out of that ranged assassin. So you start to run into, if you're not doing well against that, now all of a sudden you have a Dragon Knight pushing at you. All you have is Nazebo, and your only choice at that point is to try and dive the back line. It's not ideal. It's not ideal in any circumstance. I think that